Hey, what's up everybody? Thank you for watching. I hope you've been enjoying these short videos I've been putting out and hopefully finding some helpful information in them. If you have any questions or any topics you'd like me to discuss in these videos, shoot me a message, leave a comment, or just send me a message, let me know. I'd love to answer them for you. All right, so today, what are we gonna chat about? What's my best tip for wildlife photography? I've put out videos in the past that there's no one tip or one thing that can make your photography better. And I fully agree with that. And so this is not meant to be that. But I do think there is one thing you can work at and concentrate on that will improve your photography more than probably anything else. And that is to be able to change your settings intuitively and fast without taking your eye out of the viewfinder. So one of the things I see quite often with a lot of students and clients I take out for workshops are I suggest a setting change based on some lighting or something we're trying to do, an effect we're trying to achieve, and then they do this. They take their eye out of the viewfinder, they look at their camera, they fiddle around, change the setting, and then take a moment to find their subject, and then it moves. And so it's a lost shot. And I see this happen over and over again. And it's nothing against them, we've all gone through it. I was that photographer once, everybody was, as far as I know. Unless you learn that fast, if you are that incredible, good for you, and you're lucky. But most of us have to struggle through that. And so I think we sort of get stuck in this, oh, I have to change this setting, I take my eye out and look, kind of thing. But my suggestion is, make sure your camera is configured, and most cameras by default are configured this way, to be able to change the 4 major settings: the shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and exposure compensation. Make sure you can change all of them with one hand while shooting, usually your shooting hand, that's usually where it's at, and make sure you can change them all while your eye is in the viewfinder. Now in the beginning, it means you're gonna be slower. It's going to mess you up, you're gonna fumble around to try and find where it's at, but if you stop taking your eye out of that viewfinder when you wanna change that setting, provided you have a cooperative subject, okay? If it's a subject that you've never seen before, it's just like an amazing shot and you wanna get it and you don't wanna sit there and fumble around too much, you take your eye out and get that, right? Do that for now. But when you have a cooperative subject, if you consciously decide to stop taking your eye out of the viewfinder, keep your eye mashed in that viewfinder, and then start trying to change those settings, whatever they may be, whether it's you're changing your shutter speed, your ISO, exposure compensation, aperture, it doesn't matter. All of them should be changeable with your eye in that viewfinder and quickly and intuitively, okay? So you shouldn't have to press too many buttons to make it happen. They should be quick changes, at least for the major things. For me, when I'm shooting, the major things that I change are if I'm in a manual exposure mode, so not auto ISO, I'm changing my shutter speed and ISO. My aperture is usually staying consistent. If I'm using aperture priority with auto ISO, in that case, I'm using exposure compensation only to control my exposure, so to be able to shoot lighter or darker and that sort of thing. Of course, that's separate from focusing. Everybody knows how to focus with their eye in the viewfinder. That's something you kind of have to do to operate a camera properly, right? But these setting changes, just the fact of taking your eye out of that viewfinder so often means a missed shot when you have subjects that are only there for a moment. And I just, like I said in the beginning, I see it over and over again, and I feel so bad because it's like, oh, it's there, oh, it's gone, you know? And a lot of times, especially with bird photography, that's how long it happens. It's like, oh, look, it just hit the perch. Oh, it's facing the right way, it's gone. And you know, sometimes I feel really bad. I'll suggest, like, I see it come land out in a spot and I'm like, oh, you want to drop your exposure a little bit here. And then I see the photographer kind of take their eye out and struggle. Whereas they probably would have been better off just taking a shot with a slightly incorrect exposure versus changing it. And I'm kind of like, oh, I messed you up there. But my point is, once you practice, once you go through that sort of learning curve or that struggle of finding out where everything is and turning it into muscle memory, you're going to see such a big difference in your ability to respond to a situation and, more importantly, to make changes and creative changes. So really going under on your exposure, really going over on your exposure, that sort of thing. When you can start doing those intuitively and fast in that moment, when you see something without taking your eye out of the viewfinder, 2 things happen. You get more opportunity, and you also get to really stay with that subject and watch and wait for moments. You get to think, you give yourself a few extra seconds every time you don't take your eye out of that viewfinder and then have to reacquire your subject in the viewfinder. You've probably given yourself anywhere from 3 seconds on the low end to probably 10 seconds on the high end, depending on how tough it is for you to find that subject again. And that can mean a huge difference between a creative decision of maybe I needed to move to the left or change my perspective to fix something in the background, to clean it up, or to add some foreground into it, or just any number of creative decisions that you get to make when you don't have to fumble around with those settings. So that's my tip, that's my suggestion, is get some bug spray first off, so you don't have to deal with all these bugs in your face while you're trying to talk to the camera. And then secondly, practice changing those settings. Even if it's sitting in your backyard, pointing the camera at the ground, who cares? Just point it at an object. It doesn't even need to be a subject. It doesn't need to be wildlife. Just get that muscle memory of this button's here, this is what the direction I have to go to change things, and just get that, turn that into muscle memory, and watch how much more time you get to actually photograph those subjects that just give you that quick opportunity. So that's my tip. I hope you enjoyed it. See you guys on the next one. Happy shooting.